my friend. And then the fox said, oh, hello, everybody.
No. What did the fox say?
It's okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Church Chat. Great to have you along. And as we talk about, the sermon and all things happening, we've had a couple of weeks off. We had something called Easter.
Yeah.
Which was a great time. How good were the reaffirmations of baptisms?
Oh, that was so exciting. I loved it.
And those two boys, have come just such a long way in their relationship with God in a short period of time. Just fantastic. And, I was in them with a small group last night, and both of them said that they actually hated being up on, traditionally they would never have got up on the stage. I said, but both of them said that they felt a calm, they didn't feel nervous.
That's so good.
So that was really great. So to have them come and reaffirm their baptism was a great joy.
Yeah, it was.
And celebrating Easter together. So that's good. Well, you're in the hot seat because Nathan's in London.
Yeah, Nathan's left us again.
But not only that, you actually preached on Sunday, so you're
sense.
You're the source of all wisdom as we talk
you
today.
Say that, but we were talking before about how a lot of my sermon came from what you've taught me.
And from
you
what
were
God's
the source of all wisdom here.
And what God's taught me and other people have taught me.
Fair.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Well, we've started a brand. We should stop that. We could not talk about anything for a very long time, but let's talk about a brand new series that we started called Heart Surgery.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the Sermon on the Mount, so Matthew's Gospel, and we're going to be looking through, I think, some of the most challenging parts of Jesus's teaching. And I think, and you brought this out well, I think, on Sunday, Jesus is doing this to get us to explore what's going on deep inside, not just to follow rules for the sake of following rules, but to really deal with people's hearts. And I see this in society at the moment, like the government is trying to put in so many rules to stop people from behaving badly, but it doesn't deal with the heart that's underneath, the pain, the anguish, the struggles, the things that are influencing people underneath. And so all they're doing is sort of making a law and expecting that to change people's hearts.
Yeah.
Where only really God can change people's hearts. So do you want to read the Bible reading that you preached on the weekend?
So I preached on Matthew 5, verses 21 to 26. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you are on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you've paid the last penny.
Wow, it's a chunky passage that really goes
There's a lot
to it.
in it.
And you were rightly, you said this is the first of Jesus saying, you've heard it said, but I say. And he's really reframing the Ten Commandments in this part. And so, do not murder is one of the Ten Commandments, which we're grateful for. But he's saying, let's go to the motivation behind why you'd want to murder someone. And this is what you were starting to draw out in your sermon. What's the motivation behind people's hearts that bring them to the point of going, I'm going to do something, really immoral, really outside of the box? and take another person's life. And, and Jesus identifies it as anger. And I think it's just so easy these days to be angry at everything.
Yeah.
At the world, at the government. We've got an election coming up. You can take sides and get angry at the other side. You can do all kinds of things. And there's a lot of emotions going around. This is what I loved about your sermon, was you talked about the need for us to actually process our emotions and process our anger. So it's not like, Jesus is saying don't get angry. He's saying don't let your anger lead you into the point of sin or into the point of wanting to murder. And you hear it in people's speech. I was thinking of the people that, because you go on to talk about forgiveness and how that's an antidote, which is really good, and I'm a big fan of that, as you know. But when you hear people speak and they go, "Oh, I've forgiven this person," but then spend the next 5 minutes down talking how bad that person is, you go, have you really? I'm not sure.
It's kind of obvious for us when we're on the outside, but they don't seem to even notice that they're angry.
Yeah, and you talked about hidden anger, and I thought that was really helpful as well, that there's some anger that we can have that's bubbling under the surface, that unless, we are honest with ourselves or take an account of who we are and why we're feeling agitated, that we would pass over.
Yeah.
And
it's very easy to dismiss that anger that's sitting below the surface as just something else that, doesn't need to be dealt with.
And I think, different people get angry in different ways. And I think as a guy, guys tend to lash out, not exclusively, like we don't tend to internalize it too much, or if we do internalize it, we internalize it to the point of then lashing out. And that's why you see all this road rage and all this, I think the experts call it passive aggressive. Everything's fine, and you keep on pushing it down until it's not, and then you're punching holes in walls, or you're getting a tire iron out the car and bashing on the window of someone who cut you off, or something like that. And so there's different ways that it's expressed, but I think, as you said, it's not about if you get angry or stopping yourself from getting angry. It's what you do when anger comes.
Yeah. So we were talking earlier about how there might be some other ways of dealing with our anger. So forgiveness is a great way to deal with your anger, and processing your emotions is a big part of that. But what are some other ways we could deal with our anger?
Yeah, well, let's stay with the forgiveness for a little bit, just in case people haven't watched it. You rightly said, we struggle to forgive because we believe our anger against the other person is the only judgment that they're going to have, and that was a really good line. I wish I'd thought of it, and. And that's true, and we go, well, everybody else might say it's okay, but I'm going to get angry to say that it's not okay. And so I think learning how to forgive, and Jesus is hot on this topic. Even in the Bible reading, you said if you come before God and you got something against your brother, or sister, you've got to go and deal with it before you present your gift to the altar. And so there's this demand that Jesus is giving us, in forgiveness, because he says if you don't forgive, then the Father won't forgive you. There's a conditional thing there, and that's because you're elevating yourself to judge and elevating yourself in the place of God. And so I think we've got to take seriously Jesus's words here on saying that we've got to process this quickly, and forgiveness is I think one of the first steps in processing it. And you gave a really helpful prayer, and if you haven't gone and seen the sermon, then go and do that.
Or if you want a copy of that prayer, still happy for people to reach out.
Email the
send
office.
Send it through real easy.
And and we didn't invent it. We got it from Mr. Anderson, and but it's a helpful tool of processing your emotions and letting go and letting God be judge and doing all those sorts of things. And so I think forgiveness, is the number one way of letting go of anger and processing those emotions. The other thing I think, if we move on to that a little bit more, other things we can do. One is I think we have to stay in honesty. And I think God loves honesty. So I think he gravitates towards it. So the quicker we are honest with ourselves that we're feeling upset and not try and bury it, the easier it is to do it. And, the passage goes on to say, if you're on the way to court, deal with it quickly because you'll end up in prison. And you talk about if we don't deal with anger, that we are imprisoned, and that was great. But there's this part that Jesus says, deal with it quickly. And I think we've got to be honest with ourselves quickly. Okay, there's something going on inside of me. I've got to notice it quick. And then I've got to be able to deal with it quick. So if someone annoys you, don't wait 1 or 2 days because it actually becomes harder. Yeah. Actually deal with it in the moment. Ask for forgiveness in the moment. Seek understanding in the moment. Because it's far easier to go up to someone and say, what you just did annoyed me. Let's talk about it. Than it is 3 days later to go, that thing you did last Saturday? And they go, what thing? And you go, oh, okay.
Now I've got to explain.
Now it's going to go all back through it and all those sorts of things. And so I think there's a part of honesty and dealing with it quickly that we've got to be on top of really well. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get at with the anger. Don't come and present something to God when you know that's something to deal with it quickly. Be honest, deal with it quickly so that... and
if we're not honest with ourselves, we're not going to really process our emotions properly. And I think for me, I shared that story about the thing that upset me a few weeks ago, and a big part of getting through to the point of being able to forgive was processing my emotions by being honest with God and praying to him and going, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and processing that through my honesty with myself and with God.
Yeah. And God won't be silent in the middle of it. If you come to God not knowing what your emotion is, going, God, I've got all these feelings and it's all going over. God will help you sort those things out. God will go, well, have you thought about forgiving this person? And you go, oh, I don't really want to, but God will guide you if you involve him in the conversation of trying to work through your feelings. Now, I was talking with some guys last night, and one of them was saying, I like to sort of try and nut out where I'm feeling before I involve other people into it. And I go, why? Why not involve people into helping you nut it out to begin with? Why are you wanting to keep people away? And so I think that if you can allow God and other people into that space of processing those emotions, then your anger level will not rise to the point of blowing up. And we've all experienced people who have blown up for what seems like no reason at all, but it's because anger is like grief. It builds upon itself. So if you don't process a little bit of anger from over here and then you get a little bit of anger over there, it's not like it's different anger. It adds to the anger. Yeah. And it adds, and then you get to the point where your cup is full and then
It just
everything
snowballs.
and people just lash out, and they do, and you don't think, and you don't consider other people's feelings, you don't consider other people's emotions, you just blow your stack, and that's how murder happens, you know, and that's how, and that's what Jesus is saying. You know what? There's a healthier way to live, and so let's have a look at what's going on inside of your heart, whether you're processing your emotions, whether you're allowing people to do things. And you meet people, don't you, who they just seem unflappable, and you wonder if they're just wired that way. And some people are probably more wired that way, but most of them have learnt how to not let it build up in them, process it through, bring it before God, bring it before others, and so whenever a crisis that should make them angry comes along, they've got a lot of reserve to absorb what's going on.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter how you're wired and what's natural for you. This is something that you can learn to process your emotions, to deal with your anger quickly. It's not just for some people. This is for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who have been taught through their parents that anger is the solution. And for some people, they can use anger as a way of getting what they want. Okay? And they like being feared, or they like, the power that anger gives them. But that's not the way of Christ. That's not the way, And, we've just come off of Easter. We did the story of Jesus turning over tables. Jesus got angry at that point that they had turned a place of prayer into a place of limiting people coming into God's presence. And so even Jesus got angry to the point, but it wasn't to the point of sinning, wasn't to the point of wanting to do people harm or whatever.
Yeah.
It was about just getting angry with the injustice. And I love the fact that you said even if you're a social justice warrior, your anger can be unhelpful even in that space, and particularly if you start pushing the them and us kind of barrier, which is what our world is loving.
Yeah, I love when people are passionate about justice, but so often I've seen people go so far into that they just become angry people at all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's it was a great start to the series to encourage people to go, okay, if you're angry, even if you've learnt it from your parents, what's going on inside of your heart? And one of the things that we don't talk about with this, that I'll probably touch on a little bit this week as we come to the next topic, is sometimes if you've left that door open so long, that there becomes a spiritual element that then starts to speak in and feed into that area. And I think for people who have grown up in an angry environment and find themselves naturally, what they call naturally angry, then there's also a possibility there's a spiritual door that needs to be closed. And, and forgiveness is a good way of doing that, but that needs to be closed so that voice no longer speaks into their life. And so that's another thing in which we need to, we'll explore as we go down the line.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you say this week.
Yeah, so this week we're talking about lust. And, Jesus says, you've heard it read, you should not commit adultery, but I say unto you, if you look at a woman in an inappropriate way, you've already committed adultery in your heart. So it's going to be a killer. I mean, I'm not going to just stick on that because, it talks about coveting as well, and the 10 Commandments are don't commit adultery and do not covet your neighbour's donkey or whatever it is, what your neighbour has. So that is all wrapped up in one in Jesus' mind when he says this. So look forward to pulling that apart and,
Yeah.
and bringing that. But I love the fact that Jesus is not just saying, you're an angry person, get over it. And what he's saying is, if you're an angry person, realize that there's some heart surgery that needs to happen, because you don't have to stay angry.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this whole series. It's Jesus saying there is a better way, and it's not just about you, behaving badly or following rules or laws. It's about me and you working together on what's going on deep inside of you. And I think that's beautiful.
I'm excited to see what God does with this over the whole series
Yeah.
and what he does in our community.
Yeah.
Doing some heart surgery on all of us.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
And he started with you, and so that's
Yep.
a good place to start.
Thanks.
and so we'll move on from there. So hopefully you find it interesting. Give us a shout out if you want. You want the prayer, the forgiveness prayer.
Yep, reach out to me.
Reach out if you want to talk more about anger that's going on in your life, and you see it, and you recognize that you don't have to be it, but you don't know how to move forward with it. Then we're happy to help you as well. We want to see people set free from these things that impact their life in such a dramatic way, and because God wants to. And so we'll do that together. So thanks for joining us. Until we see you online in person, God bless.